Hey guys, welcome to Neighbor Stories with JusRead. Today we're diving into some incredible stories about overcoming the toughest neighbor disputes. Our story is titled, Building a Secret Escape Tunnel for a Neighbor Trapped by Homeowner Association Fines. The story starts like this. I never thought I'd become an amateur tunnel engineer, but life has a funny way of throwing curveballs at you. My name's Mike, and up until a few months ago, I was just your average guy living in a quiet suburban neighborhood. That all changed when I met my new neighbor, Sarah. It was a sunny Saturday morning when I first saw her moving in next door. I was out mowing my lawn, trying to stay on the good side of our local homeowner association's strict landscaping rules. Sarah looked frazzled as she lugged boxes from a rental truck to her new house. Need a hand? I called out, shutting off my mower. She looked up, relief washing over her face. Oh, that would be amazing, thank you. As we carried boxes inside, Sarah told me she'd just divorced and was starting fresh. She seemed nice enough, if a bit stressed. Little did I know, her stress levels were about to go through the roof. A week after Sarah moved in, I was coming home from work when I noticed a bright orange violation notice stuck to her front door. Curious, I walked over to take a closer look. It read, Violation unapproved exterior paint color. Fine, $500. Correction required within 7 days. I frowned. Sarah's house looked exactly the same as when she'd moved in, a perfectly innocent shade of beige. As I stood there puzzling over it, Sarah's car pulled into the driveway. Oh no, not again, she groaned, spotting the notice. Again? I asked. This has happened before? Sarah nodded, her shoulders slumping. This is the third violation notice this week. First, it was my mailbox being non-regulation. Then my grass was apparently a quarter-inch too long. Now this? I haven't even touched the paint. I shook my head in disbelief. That's insane. Have you tried talking to the homeowner association board? I've left messages, but no one's gotten back to me, Sarah said, her voice tinged with frustration. I'm starting to think moving here was a huge mistake. Over the next few weeks, I watched in horror as Sarah's situation spiraled out of control. Every few days, a new violation notice would appear, each more ridiculous than the last. Improper placement of recycling bin, unapproved window treatments, excessive bird feeder activity. The fines kept piling up, and Sarah was at her wit's end. One evening, I invited her over for dinner, hoping to offer some support and maybe brainstorm solutions. As we sat at my kitchen table, Sarah buried her face in her hands. I don't know what to do, Mike. These fines are bleeding me dry. I've already blown through most of my savings from the divorce. I pushed a cup of coffee towards her. There's got to be some way to fight this. Have you considered legal action? Sarah let out a bitter laugh. With what money? Besides, I looked into it. The homeowner association agreement I signed gives them almost unlimited power. It's like they can do whatever they want. As Sarah spoke, I felt a growing sense of anger. This wasn't just unfair, it was downright predatory. There has to be something we can do, I insisted. Maybe if we got the other neighbors involved. I've tried, Sarah cut in. Most of them are too scared of becoming targets themselves. The few who sympathized said their hands were tied. We sat in silence for a moment, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on both of us. Suddenly, a wild, completely absurd idea popped into my head. What if you could just leave? I said slowly. Sarah looked at me, confused. Leave? I can't afford to move again, Mike. And who would buy this house with all these violations? I leaned in, lowering my voice as if the homeowner association might have spies listening. I'm not talking about moving out the front door. What if there was another way out? Sarah's eyes widened as she caught my meaning. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? I nodded, a mix of excitement and nervousness bubbling up inside me. A tunnel. From your basement to somewhere else. Somewhere outside homeowner association jurisdiction. For a moment, Sarah just stared at me. Then, she burst out laughing. A tunnel? Mike, that's insane. We're not characters in a prison break movie. I couldn't help but chuckle too. It did sound ridiculous when said out loud. But as our laughter died down, I saw a glimmer of hope in Sarah's eyes. You know, she said slowly, my great-grandfather was actually a coal miner in West Virginia. He used to tell stories about digging tunnels. And just like that, our crazy plan was born. Over the next few days, we did our research. We pored over city maps, studied basic engineering principles, and even watched a few questionable YouTube tutorials on DIY tunneling. It was insane, probably illegal, and definitely against homeowner association rules. But the more we planned, the more possible it seemed. Our first major hurdle was finding a suitable exit point. We needed somewhere outside homeowner association boundaries, but close enough to be realistic. After much debate, we settled on a patch of woodland about a quarter-mile from Sarah's house. It was technically city property, but rarely visited and well screened by trees. With our route planned, we turned to gathering supplies. We couldn't exactly walk into Home Depot and ask for tunnel digging equipment, so we had to get creative. I cashed in some old savings bonds and we scrounged up an eclectic assortment of tools, shovels, a small electric jackhammer, lumber for supports, and a little garden cart for hauling dirt. As we prepared to break ground, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation. This was by far the craziest thing I'd ever done. If we got caught, we'd be in serious trouble, but seeing the renewed hope on Sarah's face made it all feel worth it. We started digging on a Friday night, figuring the weekend would give us the most uninterrupted time. I'll never forget the moment my shovel first broke through Sarah's basement floor. As I lifted that first scoop of dirt, I felt like I was crossing a point of no return. "Well," Sarah said, a nervous smile on her face, "I guess we're really doing this." And so began our double life as suburban tunnel diggers. By day, we went about our normal routines, trying to act as inconspicuous as possible. By night, we descended into Sarah's basement to chip away at our underground escape route. Progress was slow and grueling. We quickly learned that digging a tunnel is nothing like it looks in the movies. It was hot, cramped work, and every foot gained felt like a major victory. We developed a system. I'd do the digging while Sarah managed the cart, ferrying loads of dirt up to the basement where we'd bag it for later disposal. As the tunnel grew longer, so did our list of challenges. Ventilation became a serious concern, so we rigged up a system of plastic tubing and small fans. We also had to be constantly vigilant about cave-ins, carefully shoring up the walls and ceiling with wooden supports. Despite the difficulties, there was something oddly satisfying about our secret project. Each night as we emerged from the tunnel, covered in dirt and exhausted, we'd share a look of accomplishment. We were doing something, fighting back in our own weird way against the injustice of the homeowner association. Of course, keeping our operation under wraps wasn't easy. We had a few close calls with nosy neighbors, like the time Mrs. Johnson from across the street spotted me carrying lumber into Sarah's house late at night. "Doing some renovations, are we?" she asked, her tone dripping with suspicion. I fumbled for an excuse. Just helping Sarah fix up her basement. You know how old houses can be." Mrs. Johnson didn't look convinced, but thankfully she didn't press the issue. After that, we became even more careful about when and how we moved supplies. As weeks turned into months, our tunnel slowly but surely extended towards freedom. We celebrated every small milestone, 50 feet, 100 feet, halfway there. But while we were making progress underground, above ground, Sarah's situation was only getting worse. The homeowner association, seemingly frustrated by Sarah's inability to pay their mounting fines, escalated their tactics. They started sending threatening letters, talking about liens on her property and even foreclosure. Sarah was a nervous wreck, jumping at every knock on the door. "What if they try to evict me before we finish?" she asked one night as we took a break from digging. I put a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We won't let that happen. We're too close to give up now." But privately, I shared her fears. We were in a race against time, and the homeowner association seemed determined to win. Our luck nearly ran out about 3/4 of the way through our dig. We had just finished another late-night tunneling session and were cleaning up in Sarah's basement when we heard a sharp knock at the front door. Sarah froze, her face pale. "It's nearly midnight. Who could that be?" We crept upstairs, hearts pounding. Through the peephole, we could see two men in suits, definitely not our usual homeowner association busybodies. "Ms. Thompson?" one of them called out. "We're from the bank. We need to talk to you about your property." Sarah turned to me, panic in her eyes. I motioned for her to stay quiet and ushered her towards the basement door. As silently as we could, we descended the stairs and slipped into our tunnel, pulling the concealed entrance shut behind us. For what felt like hours, we huddled in the damp darkness of our half-finished tunnel, hardly daring to breathe. Eventually, we heard the men leave, but the close call left us shaken. "We need to finish this tunnel," Sarah whispered, her voice tight with determination. "It's now or never." From that point on, we doubled our efforts. We worked every night, pushing ourselves to exhaustion. Our muscles ached, our hands were raw and blistered, but we kept going. The end was in sight, and with it, Sarah's chance at freedom. Finally, after nearly 4 months of secret tunneling, we broke through to our exit point. As my shovel punctured that last layer of earth and I saw moonlight filtering in, I let out a whoop of triumph. "We did it," I shouted, turning to Sarah. "We actually did it." Sarah's eyes welled up with tears as she peered out at the woods beyond. "I can't believe it," she said softly. "We really built an escape tunnel." But our celebration was short-lived. The very next day, Sarah received a final notice from the homeowner association. They were moving to foreclose on her house in just 3 days. "This is it," Sarah said, her voice shaky but determined. "It's time to go." We spent the next 2 days carefully planning Sarah's escape. She packed up her most valuable and sentimental possessions, anything she could carry through the tunnel. I helped her set up a storage unit in the next town over for larger items. On the night of her departure, I met Sarah in her basement one last time. She had a backpack and 2 small suitcases, her entire life, condensed into what she could carry. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, suddenly feeling the weight of what we were about to do. Sarah nodded, a mix of fear and determination in her eyes. "I'm sure. I can't live under their thumb anymore. This is my only chance." With one last look around the basement that had been our secret workshop for months, we entered the tunnel. The journey through our underground passageway was surreal. Every foot of dirt, every wooden support, represented hours of our labor. It was a physical manifestation of our defiance against injustice. Finally, we emerged into the cool night air of the woods. Sarah took a deep breath, as if tasting freedom for the first time. "I don't know how to thank you, Mike," she said, turning to me with tears in her eyes. I pulled her into a hug. "Just promise me you'll be okay out there." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "I will be. My sister's picking me up down the road. I'm going to stay with her while I figure out my next move." As I watched Sarah disappear into the darkness, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in what we'd accomplished, sadness at losing my friend and neighbor, and a burning anger at the system that had driven her to this extreme. The aftermath of Sarah's disappearance was chaotic. The homeowner association was in an uproar, unable to understand how she had vanished without a trace. They sent people to check her house but of course, found nothing. I played dumb, expressing shock and concern like everyone else. A few weeks later, I received a postcard with no return address. It simply read, "Freedom tastes sweet. Thank you for everything. S. As for the tunnel, I spent the next few weekends carefully collapsing and filling it in. It felt almost sacrilegious to destroy something we'd worked so hard to create, but I knew it was necessary. By the time I was done, there was no trace left of our underground rebellion. In the months that followed, I noticed a change in our neighborhood. People started talking more, sharing their own stories of homeowner association overreach. It turned out Sarah wasn't the only one who had suffered under their tyrannical rule. Slowly but surely, a resistance formed. We started attending homeowner association meetings en masse, challenging unfair rules and demanding transparency. It wasn't easy, and we faced plenty of pushback, but gradually, things began to change. A year after Sarah's escape, our neighborhood voted in a completely new homeowner association board. The old guard was ousted, replaced by people committed to fairness and community over petty rules and profit. I often think about Sarah and our crazy tunnel adventure. While I don't condone breaking the law, I can't help but feel proud of what we accomplished. We stood up to injustice in our own unique way, and in doing so, sparked a change that benefited our entire community. Sometimes, when I'm out for a walk in the woods behind our neighborhood, I'll pass by that spot where our tunnel once emerged. There's no sign of it now, just peaceful forest. But I know it's there, buried beneath the soil, a secret monument to friendship, courage, and the lengths people will go to in the face of oppression. I never heard from Sarah again after that one postcard, but I like to imagine her out there somewhere, living her best life, free from the petty tyranny of our old homeowner association. And every time I see a for sale sign go up in our neighborhood, I smile, knowing that the new arrivals will be welcomed into a community that values people over rules and compassion over control. Building that tunnel may have been the craziest thing I've ever done, but it taught me an important lesson. Sometimes, when the system is stacked against you, you have to dig deep, literally, to find a way out. And in doing so, you might just inspire others to stand up and make a change. Update. It's been 5 years since Sarah's daring escape through our secret tunnel, and a lot has changed in our neighborhood. The new homeowner association board we voted in has been doing a great job, keeping things fair and reasonable. But I never forgot about Sarah or the crazy adventure we had. I often wondered how she was doing, hoping she'd found peace and stability somewhere far from here. Little did I know, I was about to get some answers. It was a regular Tuesday afternoon when I got home from work and found an envelope in my mailbox with no return address. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized the handwriting. It was from Sarah. Inside was a letter and a newspaper clipping. I rushed inside to read it. "Dear Mike, I hope this letter finds you well. I can't thank you enough for what you did for me. You literally gave me an escape route when I needed it most. I've enclosed a newspaper article I think you'll find interesting. Looks like our old friends at the homeowner association are finally getting what they deserve. I'm doing great now. Got a fresh start in a new city, found a good job, and even met someone special. I'm happy, Mike, truly happy, and I owe a big part of that to you. Take care. Sarah? I unfolded the newspaper clipping and my jaw dropped. The headline read, "Local Homeowner Association Board Members Indicted on Fraud Charges." According to the article, a state investigation had uncovered years of financial misconduct by our old homeowner association board. They'd been embezzling funds, taking kickbacks from preferred contractors, and using inflated fines to line their own pockets. The very fines that had driven Sarah to desperation were part of their scheme. I sat there, stunned. We'd known the old board was bad, but this was a whole new level of corruption. As I read on, a familiar name jumped out at me, Karen Johnson, our former homeowner association president. She was quoted vehemently denying all charges. The article mentioned that the investigation had been sparked by an anonymous tip, which had led authorities to a trove of incriminating documents. I couldn't help but wonder if Sarah had something to do with that tip. Just as I finished reading, my phone rang. It was Tom, my neighbor and current homeowner association board member. "Mike, have you seen the news?" he asked, his voice a mix of shock and excitement. "Just reading it now," I replied. "Can hardly believe it." Tom let out a low whistle. "It's crazy, right? Listen, "We're calling an emergency meeting tonight. Can you make it?" I assured him I'd be there, my mind racing with the implications of this bombshell. That evening, our community center was packed. Everyone was talking at once, a buzz of disbelief and anger filling the room. Tom called the meeting to order and the room fell silent. "Folks, I know we're all shocked by today's news," he began. "I want to assure everyone that the current board had no knowledge of these activities. We're as appalled as you are." A hand shot up in the back. It was Mr. Grayson, one of our older residents. "What about all those fines we paid over the years? Were they even legal?" Tom nodded gravely. "That's one of our main concerns. We're working with the authorities to determine the extent of the fraud. Rest assured, we'll do everything in our power to make this right." The meeting went on for hours as we discussed the ramifications of the indictments. By the end, we had a plan. The current board would cooperate fully with the investigation, hire a forensic accountant to go through all our records, and set up a committee to review every fine issued under the old regime. As I walked home that night, my head was spinning. I couldn't help but think of Sarah, wondering if she knew just how big a stone she might have thrown into the pond. Over the next few months, our community was turned upside down. The investigation uncovered more dirt than anyone had imagined. It turned out the old board had been running their scam for nearly a decade, collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars in fraudulent fines and kickbacks. One by one, former board members started cutting deals with prosecutors. They turned on each other, each trying to save their own skin. Karen Johnson, ever defiant, was the last holdout. She maintained her innocence right up until the day the evidence became overwhelming. In the end, she took a plea bargain too. The fallout hit our community hard. Some people lost their homes due to the fraudulent fines, and were now looking at potential compensation. Others were angry at themselves for not seeing what was happening right under our noses. Through it all, our new board worked tirelessly to right the wrongs of the past. We held town halls, met with affected homeowners one-on-one, and did our best to rebuild trust in the community. As for me, I found myself thrust into an unexpected role. People knew I'd been one of the first to stand up to the old board, and many came to me for advice or just to talk. I did my best to help, all the while keeping Sarah's secret safe. About a year after the indictments, I received another letter from Sarah. This time, she included a phone number. With shaky hands, I dialed the number. After 5 years, I was finally going to talk to my partner in crime again. "Mike?" Sarah's voice came through, a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Is that really you?" "It's me," I said, grinning like an idiot even though she couldn't see me. "It's so good to hear your voice, Sarah." We talked for hours, catching up on everything that had happened. Sarah confessed that she had indeed been the one to tip off the authorities. "After I got settled in my new life," she explained, "I couldn't stop thinking about all the other people still suffering under that homeowner association. I had taken some documents with me when I left, thinking they might be useful someday. When I finally worked up the courage, I sent copies to the state attorney general's office." I let out a low whistle. "Sarah, you're a hero. You know that, right? You've changed so many lives." She laughed, a sound I had sorely missed. "I don't know about hero. I just did what I thought was right. Besides, I had a pretty amazing accomplice." We talked about the possibility of her coming back to testify if needed, but the prosecutors assured her that with the evidence she'd provided and the plea bargains, it wouldn't be necessary. Sarah was free to move on with her life, which she had done admirably. She told me about her new home in a small, friendly community with no homeowner association. She'd fallen in love with a kind man who accepted her past without judgment. They were even talking about starting a family. As our call wound down, Sarah's voice grew serious. "Mike, I can never thank you enough for what you did for me. You gave me my life back." I felt a lump in my throat. "You did the same for me, Sarah. You showed me that one person really can make a difference. Our whole community is better because of you." After we hung up, I sat in my living room for a long time, thinking about everything that had happened. The tunnel we dug might be long gone, filled in and forgotten, but its impact was still being felt. In the years that followed, our community underwent a transformation. The new Homeowner Association Board, with input from residents, rewrote our bylaws from the ground up. We focused on fostering a sense of community rather than enforcing petty rules. The dreaded violation notices became a thing of the past, replaced by friendly reminders and offers of assistance. We started community projects, a neighborhood garden, regular block parties, even a program to help elderly residents with home maintenance. The very things that the old homeowner association would have fined us for became sources of pride and connection. As for me, I found a new purpose. My experience with Sarah and the homeowner association battle led me to get involved in local politics. I ran for city council on a platform of accountability and community empowerment. To my surprise, I won. Now, I'm working to take the lessons we learned in our neighborhood to the whole town. It's not always easy, and there are plenty of challenges, but every time things get tough, I think about that tunnel. I think about the determination it took to dig it, one shovelful at a time, and I keep going. Sarah and I keep in touch now, exchanging emails and the occasional phone call. She's doing great, loving her new life. Sometimes I think about asking her to come back for a visit, to see how things have changed, but I know that chapter of her life is closed, and that's okay. In the end, our crazy tunnel scheme did more than just help Sarah escape. It sparked a change that rippled out far beyond our little neighborhood. It taught us all that sometimes, you have to dig deep to find justice. And when you do, you might just unearth a better community for everyone. And guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. If you enjoyed this epic neighbor showdown, please smash that like button, comment with some house emojis to show your support, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thanks a lot, and I will see you again tomorrow with another amazing story.